Imagine coming home from a grueling work trip, ready to collapse into your own bed, only to find out your house, your sanctuary, your pride and joy has been sold out from under you by your own wife and mother-in-law. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Well, buckle up, because this actually happened to me, Dr. Ethan Caldwell, a psychologist who thought he had life all figured out. How do you go from blissful ignorance to discovering the ultimate betrayal? Stick around, because this story is a roller coaster of deception, drama, and, oh yes, a revenge plot that'll leave you cheering. A perfect life, or, so I thought. Let's rewind to 6 months ago. I'm Dr. Ethan Caldwell, a 38-year-old psychologist based in Seattle, living what I thought was the American dream. Picture this: a cozy, craftsman-style house in a quiet neighborhood, a successful private practice, and a marriage that seemed rock solid. My wife, Laura, was the charming, organized type, always planning dinner parties or redecorating our home. My mother-in-law, Diane, lived nearby and was a bit overbearing, sure, but I chalked it up to her just being involved. Life was good, or so I thought. I'd spent years building this life. That house? It wasn't just a house. It was my first big purchase after years of grinding through grad school and low-paying internships. Every detail, the hardwood floors, the backyard deck I built myself, screamed me. Laura and I had shared countless memories there. Late-night talks, holiday parties, even the time we adopted our goofy golden retriever, Max. But here's the thing about perfect lives. They're often built on blind spots. The trip that changed everything, fast forward to last spring. I got a call about a dream opportunity, a 2-week consulting gig in Chicago for a high-profile mental health conference. It was the kind of thing that could skyrocket my career, maybe even land me a book deal. Laura was all smiles when I told her. "Go for it, Ethan," she said, kissing my cheek. "We'll hold down the fort." Diane even chimed in, offering to keep Laura company while I was gone. Sweet, right? Yeah, I thought so too. I packed my bags, gave Max a belly rub, and hopped on a plane, blissfully unaware that my life was about to implode. While I was in Chicago giving talks and shaking hands, Laura and Diane were apparently starring in their own episode of Real Housewives, Betrayal Edition. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just say I was too busy being Dr. Ethan Caldwell, the rising star, to notice the red flags piling up back home. The first crack in the facade. Here's where things get juicy. About a week into my trip, I started noticing weird stuff. Laura's texts were short, almost curt. Normally, she'd send me pictures of Max or updates about her day, but now, one-word replies. Fine. Busy. I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed, right? Then came the phone call from my neighbor, Tom. Tom's the nosy but lovable type, always waving from his porch. He sounded confused. "Ethan, why's there a for sale sign in your yard?" I laughed it off. "Gotta be a mistake, Tom. Maybe it's the wrong house." But my stomach did a little flip. I called Laura immediately. No answer. I texted her. "What's this about a for sale sign?" Crickets. I tried Diane next. Same deal. By now, I'm pacing my hotel room, my psychologist brain trying to analyze the situation. Denial? Maybe. Delusion? Definitely. But deep down, I knew something was off. Digging into the mystery. The next day, I did what any self-respecting, slightly paranoid person would do. I started sleuthing. Between conference sessions, I called my real estate agent, Sarah, who'd helped me buy the house years ago. "Ethan," she said, her voice tight, "your house is listed." "I thought you knew." My heart sank. Listed? By whom? Sarah sent me the listing details, and there it was. My house, complete with professional photos priced at a steal. The seller? Laura Caldwell, my wife. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Why would Laura list our house without telling me? And why was it priced so low? This wasn't just a mix-up. This was deliberate. I tried to stay calm, psychologist, remember? But my mind was racing. Was Laura in trouble? Was someone forcing her? Or was this something else entirely? I booked the next flight home, cutting my trip short. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Landing in a nightmare, I stepped off the plane in Seattle, my mind a tornado of questions and worst-case scenarios. It was late, past midnight, and the city felt eerily quiet, like it was holding its breath for the chaos about to unfold. I didn't go straight home. Something told me I needed to tread carefully, like I was walking into a trap. Instead, I called my buddy Mike, a lawyer who'd helped me with some contracts for my practice. "Mike," I said, my voice shaky, "I think Laura's selling our house behind my back." There was a long pause before he replied, "Ethan, get to my office first thing tomorrow. And don't go home yet." I crashed at a hotel that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage. Was Laura unhappy? Had I missed signs? And what was Diane's role in this? My mother-in-law had always been a bit of a meddler, but this felt like next-level scheming. By morning, I was a mix of exhausted and wired, ready to uncover whatever mess I'd walked into. The paper trail of betrayal. At Mike's office, we started digging. Mike's one of those guys who can smell BS from a mile away, and he didn't waste time. First, he pulled the property records. Sure enough, the house was under contract, already. The buyer was some LLC, which screamed shady flipper to Mike. But here's the kicker. The sale documents had Laura's signature and a forged version of mine. My jaw hit the floor. Forgery? This wasn't just a sneaky move. This was illegal. Mike kept digging while I sat there, numb. He found emails between Laura and a real estate agent. Not Sarah, but some guy I'd never heard of. The emails were cold, calculated. "Make it quick," Laura wrote. "He's out of town, so we've got a window." Another email mentioned Diane. "Mom's handling the buyer's side. She's got it under control." My mother-in-law wasn't just complicit, she was orchestrating this. I felt like I was in a bad movie, except this was my life. Confronting the truth, I couldn't avoid it anymore. I had to face Laura. Mike warned me to stay calm. Don't tip them off until we have a plan. But I was done playing detective from the sidelines. I drove to our house. My house, the one I'd poured my soul into. When I pulled up, the "for sale" sign was gone, but a moving truck was parked out front. My heart raced. Were they already clearing it out? I walked in, and there was Laura, directing movers like she was staging a Broadway show. Max, my dog, bounded over, tail wagging, oblivious to the storm brewing. Laura froze when she saw me. "Ethan, you're back early." Her voice was syrupy, but her eyes betrayed her. Pure panic. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. "Why's our house for sale, Laura?" I asked, my voice low. She stammered something about needing a fresh start, but it was all nonsense. That's when Diane walked in, carrying a box labeled kitchen. Her face went white. "Ethan, dear," Diane started, but I cut her off. "Save it. I know everything." Okay, maybe I didn't know everything, but I knew enough to see the guilt written all over them. The movers, sensing the vibe, quietly slipped outside. Laura tried to pivot, saying it was for us, that the house was too much upkeep. But I wasn't buying it. I'd seen the emails. I'd seen my forged signature. This wasn't about upkeep. This was a calculated betrayal. The motive unravels. Later that day, Mike called with more dirt. Turns out Diane had a history of shady real estate deals. She'd been flipping properties under the table for years, using her charm to dodge scrutiny. Laura, it seemed, was her latest accomplice. The LLC buying my house, linked to a developer Diane had worked with before. The plan was to sell my house cheap, let the developer renovate it, and split the profits when it resold for double. My house, my memories, was just a pawn in their get-rich-quick scheme. But why me? Why now? Mike had a theory. Laura and Diane knew I was about to hit it big with my career. A book deal, speaking gigs, it was all on the horizon. Selling the house was their way to cash out before I became too powerful to manipulate. It sounds insane, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Laura had always been jealous of my success, dropping subtle jabs about my long hours. Diane? She just saw dollar signs. The plan to fight back. Now you're probably thinking, Ethan, how do you even process this kind of betrayal? Trust me, as a psychologist, I'm trained to stay cool under pressure, but this tested every ounce of my self-control. Sitting in Mike's office, with the evidence of Laura and Diane's scheme laid out like a crime scene, I had a choice: roll over or fight back. Spoiler alert, I wasn't about to let them walk away with my house and my dignity. It was time to get even, and I was going to do it my way. Smart, calculated, and with a twist they'd never see coming. Mike and I brainstormed. The house sale wasn't finalized yet. The closing was scheduled for next week. That gave us a narrow window to derail their plan. Mike's first move was to file an emergency injunction to halt the sale, citing the forged signature. "This'll spook the buyer," he said, grinning, "and it'll make Laura and Diane sweat." But I wanted more than a legal stall. I wanted them to feel the same gut punch I did. So I started thinking like the psychologist I am. How do you outsmart someone who thinks they've already won? Turning the tables. Here's where my training came in handy. Laura and Diane thought they knew me. Predictable Ethan. Always busy, always trusting. But they forgot one thing. I spend my days analyzing human behavior. I knew their weaknesses. Laura was impulsive, prone to cracking under pressure. Diane, she was cocky, convinced she was untouchable. My plan was to exploit both. First, I played dumb. I went back to the house, acting like I was open to talking. Laura, desperate to keep me in the dark, doubled down on her sob story about needing a fresh start. I nodded, pretending to buy it while secretly recording every word. Diane, meanwhile, couldn't resist gloating. "You'll thank us later, Ethan," she said, smirking. "This house was holding you back." Oh, Diane, you had no idea how much you were about to be held back. While I kept them distracted, Mike worked behind the scenes. He tracked down the developer behind the LLC, a guy named Vince, who had a reputation for cutting corners. Mike casually mentioned the injunction and hinted that the forged signature could spark a fraud investigation. Vince panicked. Developers like him hate legal heat. It's bad for business. By the next day, he was waffling on the deal, which put Laura and Diane in a tailspin. The sting operation. But I wasn't done. I wanted to expose them in a way they couldn't wiggle out of. Enter my secret weapon, Sarah, my original real estate agent. Sarah was furious when she learned what Laura and Diane had done. "Ethan," she said, "let me help you nail them." Her idea, a fake buyer. Sarah knew someone who could pose as a wealthy investor, eager to outbid the LLC. The goal was to lure Laura and Diane into a meeting where they'd spill everything, thinking they were about to make bank. We set it up perfectly. Sarah contacted Laura saying she had a client willing to pay 20% above the asking price. Cash. No questions asked. Laura took the bait immediately, and Diane was practically salivating. They agreed to meet the buyer at a coffee shop downtown. What they didn't know, the buyer was wired, and Mike had a private investigator on standby to record the whole thing. I stayed out of sight, watching from across the street, my heart pounding. This was it. The moment they'd hang themselves. At the meeting, Laura and Diane laid it all bare. They bragged about forging my signature, laughed about how I'd never notice until it was too late, and even mentioned splitting the profits with Vince. It was like watching a confession on Dateline. The investigator got every word, every smirk, every incriminating detail. When the buyer asked about me, Diane waved a hand. "Ethan's too busy playing doctor to care." That line, it lit a fire in me. They were about to learn just how much I cared. Tightening the noose. With the recorded confession in hand, I felt like I'd just pulled off a heist. Laura and Diane thought they were one step away from a fat payday, but they'd just handed me the keys to their downfall. The footage from the coffee shop meeting was gold. Every word they said was a nail in their coffin. But I wasn't ready to drop the hammer just yet. I wanted to make sure they felt the walls closing in, the same way I did when I found out my home was being stolen. This wasn't just about stopping the sale anymore. It was about making them face the consequences of their betrayal. Mike and I regrouped to plan the next move. The injunction was already causing chaos. The developer, Vince, was threatening to pull out, and Laura was blowing up my phone with texts ranging from fake apologies to outright demands that I sign the papers. I ignored her. Instead, I focused on amplifying their panic. Mike suggested leaking a hint of trouble to the local real estate community. Seattle's market is tight-knit, and word spreads fast. Sarah, my real estate agent, dropped a casual tip to a few colleagues that the sale of my house was tied up in a legal mess involving forgery. Suddenly, Laura and Diane's shady agent was fielding questions he couldn't answer, and their perfect plan started to unravel. A public shaming setup said occurred. Now, here's where I got a little creative. I knew Laura and Diane cared about one thing above all else: their reputation. Laura loved playing the perfect wife at neighborhood BBQs, and Diane fancied herself a pillar of the community, always bragging about her business savvy. So I decided to hit them where it hurt, their social standing. I wasn't going to just sue them, though Mike assured me we had a slam-dunk case for fraud. I wanted them to squirm in front of the people they'd spent years impressing. I reached out to Tom, my nosy but loyal neighbor, and a few other folks from the neighborhood. I didn't spill all the details, just enough to get them curious. "Hey, Tom," I said over coffee, "you ever hear about someone selling a house without the owner's consent?" His eyes lit up. Tom's the kind of guy who lives for gossip, and within hours the neighborhood group chat was buzzing. People started asking Laura questions at the grocery store, and Diane's book club suddenly wasn't so welcoming. I didn't have to say much. Their own guilt did the heavy lifting. Laura's fake smiles couldn't hide her stress, and Diane's usual swagger was crumbling. The final trap. While the social pressure cooked, Mike and I set the stage for the knockout blow. We knew the recorded confession was enough to scare Laura and Diane into backing off, but I wanted to confront them with undeniable proof in a way they couldn't escape. Mike suggested a mediation meeting, neutral ground with a lawyer present to discuss the house sale. Laura and Diane, desperate to salvage their deal and their reputations, agreed. They thought they could talk their way out of it, maybe even guilt me into letting it go. Big mistake. We booked a conference room at Mike's firm, all professional and official. I told Laura and Diane to bring their real estate agent, figuring he'd be dumb enough to dig their hole deeper. The day of the meeting, I was nervous but ready. Mike had the recording queued up, and Sarah was there as a witness. When Laura and Diane walked in, they looked like they'd aged a decade in a week. Sleepless nights will do that. Their agent, a greasy guy named Carl, was all bluster, talking about how I was obstructing a legitimate sale. I let him ramble, savoring the moment. Then Mike dropped the bomb. "Before we proceed," he said, calm as ever, "we'd like to review some evidence." He played the coffee shop recording, loud and clear. Laura's voice, bragging about the forgery, echoed in the room. Diane's smug laugh followed. Carl went pale. Laura's mouth opened, but no words came out. Diane tried to interrupt. "That's out of context," but Mike shut her down. "We also have emails, forged documents, and a paper trail linking you to Vince's LLC. Care to explain?" The room was silent. Checkmate. The fallout begins. The mediation room was a pressure cooker. Laura's face was a mask of shock, her eyes darting like a cornered animal. Diane, usually so quick with an excuse, just stared at the table, her hands clenched. Their agent, Carl, stammered something about misunderstandings before bolting for the door, muttering about needing to make a call. Mike didn't stop him. We had everything we needed. The recording, the emails, the forged signature. It was an airtight case. But as satisfying as it was to watch them squirm, I wasn't done. This wasn't just about winning. It was about making sure they'd never pull something like this again. Mike laid out our terms. Withdraw the house sale immediately, or we'd file a fraud lawsuit and turn the evidence over to the police. Oh, and one more thing. I wanted a public apology. Not just to me, but to the neighborhood, the people they'd lied to with their fresh start nonsense. Laura tried to protest, but Diane, for once, shut her down. "We'll do it," she muttered, her voice barely audible. I could tell it killed her to say it. Good. Let it sting. The neighborhood showdown. The apology happened at a community meeting I suggested they host. Picture this: a packed rec center, nosy neighbors whispering, and Laura and Diane standing at a podium like kids caught cheating on a test. Tom, my neighbor, was front row, practically vibrating with glee. I stayed in the back, letting them face the music. Laura's voice shook as she read a scripted apology, admitting they'd misrepresented the house sale. Diane, true to form, tried to spin it as a family misunderstanding, but the crowd wasn't buying it. Someone, pretty sure it was Tom's wife, yelled, "What about Ethan's signature?" The room erupted in murmurs. Laura looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. By the next day, the story was all over the neighborhood. Laura and Diane's social stock plummeted. Diane's book club postponed their meetings, and Laura stopped showing up to yoga class. The real estate community wasn't kind either. Carl's reputation took a hit, and Vince's LLC quietly backed out of several local deals. Sarah, my agent, made sure every realtor in Seattle knew the truth. It was a masterclass in consequences, and I didn't have to lift a finger. The community did the rest. Reclaiming my home. With the sale officially canceled, I moved back into my house. Walking through the front door felt surreal. Max bounded over, tail wagging like nothing had changed, but I could still feel the weight of what happened. The movers had left boxes half-packed, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing everything. I spent that first night on the couch, Max curled up beside me, just soaking in the fact that this place was still mine. But the victory was bittersweet. My marriage was over and my trust in family shattered. I filed for divorce the next week. Mike handled everything, ensuring Laura wouldn't get a dime of the house or my practice. She didn't fight it, probably because she knew I had enough dirt to bury her in court. Diane, meanwhile, slunk off to lick her wounds. Last I heard, she was trying to sell her own place to cover legal fees. Karma's funny like that. As for me, I started rebuilding. I fixed up the deck, repainted the living room, and even started writing that book I'd always dreamed of. The working title? Trust and Betrayal. A Psychologist's Tale. Catchy, right? A glimmer of revenge's sweet taste. But let's be real, there was one last twist I couldn't resist. Remember that developer, Vince? Turns out he wasn't just shady, he was sloppy. Mike tipped off a contact at the city's permitting office about some of Vince's renovations on other properties. A quick investigation later, and Vince was hit with fines that made his eyes water. It wasn't directly tied to my house, but knowing he was paying for his part in the scheme, that felt like icing on the revenge cake. Laura and Diane's plan didn't just fail, it cost everyone involved more than they ever imagined. The moment of triumph. This was it. The peak of the storm I'd been riding for weeks. Laura and Diane's house of cards had collapsed, and I was standing tall, holding the wreckage of their scheme in my hands. The community meeting apology was just the appetizer. The real climax came when I realized I hadn't just saved my house. I'd taken back my life. Sitting in Mike's office a few days later, with the divorce papers drafted and the house sale officially dead, I felt a rush unlike anything else. It wasn't just relief. It was power. I'd outsmarted two people who thought they could play me for a fool, and I'd done it without losing myself in the process. The final nail in their coffin came unexpectedly. A local news blog, tipped off by someone in the neighborhood, thanks Tom, picked up the story. They didn't name names, but the headline, "Seattle Duo Caught in Shady Real Estate Scam," was close enough to make Laura and Diane's lives hell. Social media did the rest. Diane's carefully curated image as a businesswoman was toast, and Laura became a pariah in the circles she once ruled. I didn't have to say a word. The truth was louder than any revenge I could have planned. Watching their world crumble while I rebuilt mine, that was the ultimate checkmate. Why it mattered. This wasn't just about a house or even a marriage. It was about trust, betrayal, and the fight to reclaim what's yours. As a psychologist, I've spent years helping people navigate their darkest moments, but living through one myself changed me. I saw how far people will go for greed, how family can turn into strangers overnight. But I also learned I'm tougher than I thought. Laura and Diane underestimated me, thinking I'd cave or walk away. Instead, I played their game better than they ever could, using strategy, patience, and a little neighborhood gossip to flip the script. The consequences rippled beyond them. The real estate agent, Carl, lost half his clients after word got out about his role. Vince, the developer, was drowning in fines and bad press, his shady LLC under scrutiny. My house, my sanctuary, was safe, and Max was still snoring on the couch like nothing had happened. But the biggest win? I walked away with my integrity intact, a story to tell, and a newfound respect for my own resilience. Laura and Diane? They're still picking up the pieces, and I'm not losing sleep over it. So, there you have it. The insane story of how my wife and mother-in-law tried to sell my house out from under me while I was on a work trip, and how I turned the tables with a mix of brains, grit, and a little neighborhood justice. I'm Dr. Ethan Caldwell, and what started as a gut-punch betrayal ended with me reclaiming my home, my dog Max, and my peace of mind. Laura and Diane, they're stuck dealing with ruined reputations and a community that sees right through them. Meanwhile, I'm back in my craftsman house, writing my book and savoring the sweet taste of revenge done right. Life's funny like that. Sometimes the people who try to break you end up building you stronger. Let's keep the vibe going. If you loved this roller coaster of a story, full of family drama, betrayal, and a comeback for the ages, then you've got to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Revenge with Arthur. I'm diving into more wild tales like this, breaking down the psychology behind deception and sharing tips on how to protect yourself from the Lauras and Dianes of the world. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and ring the bell so you don't miss a single story. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. What do you think? Now it's your turn. Have you ever dealt with a betrayal that made your blood boil? Maybe a sneaky coworker, a shady friend, or even a family member who crossed the line? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and I want to hear your stories. Or, if you've got a genius revenge idea, share that too. Let's keep this community buzzing with epic tales of standing up and fighting back. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video on Revenge with Arthur.